Welcome everyone to Conversations in Between, Bridging Worlds and Building Strengths, where we engage in powerful conversations with women who inspire change, break barriers, and redefine what it means to be a leader in their field.
This project was born out of a desire to highlight the voices of women who are shaping their industries, their communities, and the world around them. We believe that by sharing their journeys, challenges, and successes, we can inspire others to step into their own power.
We are honoured to introduce our first guest today, Dr. Cathryn MacCallum. Dr. Cathryn MacCallum is a socio-economist with over 30 years of international experience in sustainable livelihoods and global learning. Her career began on Mafia Island, Tanzania, where she managed a dairy farm within a coconut plantation before living and working in Zanzibar.
As a founding director of Sazani Associates, an NGO dedicated to natural resource governance, Cathryn has collaborated with various governments, UN agencies, NGOs, and private sector entities across Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the MENA regions. Fluent in English and Kiswahili, she is passionate about connecting with diverse communities and cultures.
Dr. Cathryn MacCallum, a chartered environmentalist, has been recognised as a joint winner of the Outstanding Contribution Award for EDI, celebrating her impactful work in equity, diversity, and inclusion by the Institute of Materials and Mining. Thank you for joining us today, Cathryn.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So where are you joining us today?
I'm joining you from sunny Wales in the UK.
Amazing. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
We've invited you here today because we think you are a pioneer of women in leadership roles, and we'd like to know how you personally have overcome challenges that you face in these leadership roles, and how would you overcome them? How have you overcome them?
Thank you, Hania and Asfahan, and thank you again for inviting me. I think myself, like many other women, have really encountered barriers or systemic barriers that relate to different policies, practices, or procedures that are ingrained in societal structures that really restrict access and opportunities. These barriers quite often are unintentional, but they perpetuate disparities, and women being one of them. And I've also suffered from this, as have many of my close colleagues. For example, workplace policies requiring everyone to work full time, has an inadvertent disadvantage with anyone with a caregiving responsibility. And women predominantly have care. If they have children, they're still the primary caregiver. So that often limits career advancement opportunities. I've been lucky in that I have been predominantly employed by myself, and so I have been able to navigate this. But in the instance where I have been employed, I can remember in one of my first jobs having to use my annual leave because my children were sick, and there was just no provision. And limiting factors like that, children, education. So I think balancing being a parent and a professional is still, even in the 21st century, one of the hardest challenges and the biggest challenges that a woman faces. What can be done about that? I mean, with Sazani, for the last 20 years, we have made sure that we offer flexible working practices, always have. I think because we're predominantly women-led, it's been intuitive to us. And also in terms of the projects that we develop and deliver, we focused an awful lot on involving women educators in decision-making processes, and then so that everything becomes considered, actually, I think, from a female perspective as well as a male perspective, and contributes towards a more inclusive leadership structure. We're also, through Sazani, again, we're creating platforms for women, and this is a good example. I mean, the work that you guys are doing, and building that into our coastal education and reforestation initiatives that we're developing. So I think ultimately building collective strengths, challenging traditional hierarchies, and supporting the wider world of work to realize that being inclusive, by being flexible, you actually get the best out of people.
So we've spoken about how we can overcome barriers that women face in leadership roles. We want to look at how women can balance authenticity and authority in leadership without being penalized for it. Have you experienced anything like that in your personal career?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, when you think about authenticity and authority, I think to strike a balance requires the ability to nurture your own inner confidence and self-worth. And I think one of the biggest issues a lot of women, myself included, and a lot of my colleagues and friends actually suffer from is imposter syndrome. And I think it is an issue that just stays with you your whole life. And one very learned sort of person that I worked with, who's got quite a few years on me, sort of told me, that is about embracing your self-worth. Imposter syndrome means that you are always looking to achieve, always looking to strive, and you should see that as a strength rather than having that blind confidence. So I think it's something which I've tried to embrace, or I try to embrace. But it comes from being able to I suppose, emphasize sort of diverse leadership styles and try and own your authenticity without fear of penalty. So it's trying to muster the confidence just to be who you are, and acceptance, and achieve that acceptance of yourself.
Thank you. Well, there's definitely a lot to unpack here. Thank you for sharing that with us. Have you found that in your experience, was this something that you felt also in academia, especially later on in your academic career when you started to work in predominantly male-dominated fields? Or did you find this was more in your professional career, the whole notion of imposter syndrome and how to overcome that?
I think it's a female attribute, but I think, I have worked predominantly in male-dominated sort of settings, be it agriculture, be it mining and minerals sector, and so I've spent a lot of time sort of working professionally with men. I've also spent a lot of time working in Africa, sort of northwest, east and south, and dealing and having to negotiate and navigate sort of the gender imbalances that just are just there. They're implicit, they are endemic in a lot of the countries I've worked in. As I've gotten older, and as I've gotten more qualified, that has become easier, because thankfully being seen as an elderly woman, or what would be referred to in Swahili as a bibi, and having a PhD means that only a man who is older than me and equally qualified with me is now can regard himself as being superior to me. And so that has been something that has eased the path as I've gotten older in that sense. And because most of my work has sort of been in Africa, that is something that's lived with me.
You've spoken about how you've lived in many different areas of the world, worked in many different areas of the world. Do you think the workplace culture and this idea of competition that you've mentioned, is it the same internationally, or do you find it's different in Europe, Africa, and all of the other places, South America, that you've worked in? Is it a common theme, or does it change within these places?
No, there are definitely cultural differences. For example, working in the Nordic regions, in Norway, for example, a man won't help you carry anything because you are seen to be equal. And if you can't carry your own bag, why have you made it so heavy? But that is perceiving you as on a par. and you are responsible for your bag as a person. And there's little distinguishing, and in the workplace as well. So you've got some countries like, predominantly the Nordic regions. I've not been to Iceland, but I think that is the most equal of all countries in terms of gender and gender equality indices. So you go from sort of that extreme to working in sort of MENA, in sort of Middle East, North Africa, and a lot of African countries, where someone will automatically help you carry a bag because they see themselves as stronger than you. So which is best? And it varies. But I think when it comes to professional acknowledgement, it's changing. It's changing. I mean, for my work of the last definitely 12 years, I've been working more and more with women who are postgraduates, women who are doctorates, who have doctorates, or have their PhDs, and who are very, very vocal about their rights and advocate for their rights. And I do see a change. So that's within my professional setting. But if I take that down then to the people that I work with in rural communities, I would argue that gender stereotyping is still a predominant issue and a major obstacle, where women quite often are perceived not to have a voice that is of value. And I think in rural settings in lots of countries, from Europe through to Africa, through to Latin America and the Caribbean, I think being a woman in a rural setting, you are still seen quite often as less capable, less competent than a man.
And you speak about women advocating for yourselves. You said the people that you work with in your professional circle have noticed a change, and you notice people are advocating for themselves. But you also mentioned people that may be working in different fields. Do you think what are some ways that we can possibly help them to advocate and negotiate for what they deserve?
I think there's self-advocacy. Self-advocacy comes with confidence. It comes with harnessing one's own ability to make choice and affect change. To strengthen that requires skill development, requires mentorship and support networks, knowing that you're not alone, having a shared voice. I mean the work that you guys are doing, and I know sort of focusing on International Women's Day initially, but moving forward, and the platform that you're establishing, I think having programs that connect professionals with emerging women leaders, that foster guidance, foster confidence, that really equip women at all stages of their career with the tools to assert both their needs, but also acknowledge their strengths effectively.
I agree.
Yeah. And what would you say, if there are, in your experience, what are some practical ways that we can challenge some of these gender biases, specifically in our workspaces?
All biases require individual and collective action. And gender bias is no different. And it begins with awareness and education. A lot of people won't even consider that they have a gender bias, but it'll be implicit and only through awareness and education. And it's not just women, it's men and boys as well. I mean, I'm sure you both have brothers and fathers and uncles, and you'll have been exposed to the familial sort of settings, and they may be proud of their sister, of their daughter, of their nieces, but are they proud in the same way that they would be of their sons, of their brothers, of their nephews? And so it's about education, it's about awareness, it's about acknowledgement of your own biases, and then looking at how a culture of continuous learning and self-improvement can be fostered. I think also there's a role for policymakers, whether you're looking at organisational policy or regional or even national policies, so that there are clear procedures for reporting and addressing any form of discriminatory behaviour, ensuring accountability and reinforcing a commitment to equity and equality. You know, I think these are really, really important. And again, bringing this back to Sazani, I know we're predominantly women-led, but I like to think that's not why we foster this, but we see equality of voice, and I think in some ways the women perhaps have the louder voice within Sazani, but it's important. It's important, and female-headed organisations, just as in female-headed households, you know, women have a lot of responsibility and things to juggle, and it's important that they get the respect that they deserve for that.
I'm just going to add another question. So we spoke about the workplaces and how your field in particular is male dominated. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's also a space for male allies, to also empower women in this way? And how do you think in the workplace that is possible?
Definitely. I mean, again, just pulling on Sazani, I would like to think that everyone in Sazani feels that the men in the organisation are their allies. And it's really important to have male allies. I mean, you'll always have people that you connect with and those connections, and you'll always have people that you don't connect with. But those connections ideally should not be sort of gendered, and it should be, so having someone that you connect with on a professional level, be they male or female, you know, it shouldn't matter. And having and working, I think, in multidisciplinary, multi-gendered groups is really, really important. And I think that exposure to difference changes how you think and how you feel. A lot has been done in the world of racism in relation to exposure to others, but I think in terms of gender equity, you know, exposure to the capabilities and competencies of women is also really, really important.
Thank you. Really interesting, and especially I think it's such an important point that you mentioned there, that to challenge gender biases initially at first, that acknowledgement has to happen within the self. I think that's really important to emphasize, that before we want to make any systematic change or policy, it has to happen within the individual first, acknowledging that. So I think that was a really important point. Yeah, thank you.
We've been holding women's conversations all around the world, and many people have been part of them, and we've had a question that we've asked everyone, which we want to ask you. How can we make everyone feel included, heard and valued, no matter where they come from, in terms of talking about empowerment?
That's a really important question. And I'd like to start from the end and work backwards here. Empowerment. I think, first of all, empowerment is a grossly misused word and term everywhere. I do not believe it is possible to empower anyone. I think someone can be empowered by exposure, by education. I think in terms of understanding empowerment, first of all, you need to look at what it means. And there are three aspects of power. You know, there's the power within, and how do you embrace that power within? How do you stay true to yourself? I know early in my career, I felt sort of pressured to fit certain molds, but over time, I've realized that authenticity actually sort of fosters genuine connections and respect. Power within also in terms of challenging outdated norms, like I've mentioned earlier, you know, having the confidence to be able to push back against stereotypes that equate authority with a lack of empathy. You know, how can we lead with both strength and passion. And in terms of inclusivity, you know, environments that celebrate diverse perspectives, they sort of enable us to tap into our power to affect change. And by tapping into that power to affect change, we are becoming empowered to challenge and to foster, support, push for work-life balances, but also equal opportunities. And then I think collaboration. You know, I've been part of teams where thankfully power with was the norm and power over wasn't the norm. But I've also been in situations where people have had power over, and it's again, how can you challenge that? And where there is power with, you know, the collective energy that comes from that has just led to so many remarkable innovations. So I think self-advocacy, this has been a big learning curve for me. Developing my skills, honing my negotiation, communication skills. I remember going to sort of skilled communicator training in London many, many moons ago, but it stayed with me, you know, and having mentors, whether they be of male or female, but having people who can mentor you through a process. So seeking out mentors who believe in you and who can bolster your confidence to voice your needs and your aspirations. So raising awareness, open dialogues, challenging unconscious biases, enabling sort of collective reflection and change. I think these are really, really, really important. You mentioned intersectionality and some of the information you provided me. And I think understanding, you know, factors like race, like class, like sexuality, actually intersect, how they intersect with gender, actually help us to appreciate diverse experiences. You know, amplification of diverse voices. We need a platform for women to share their stories and enrich our collective understanding that in a way that fosters solidarity. And I really sort of do believe, I suppose, pulling all that together by weaving approaches like this into both our personal and our professional lives, we can create environments where every woman feels empowered and valued. And that is really what we should all be striving for.
So thank you so much.
No, thank you guys.
We're really happy that you joined us today. And we hope that we can work with you and talk more in the future about how we can further empower and build bridges within the community of women.
Great, lovely. I look forward to being involved. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Gals.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we are really excited to welcome our next guest speaker, Orsolya Takács, or Orsi. Our first question was that we wanted to discuss is basically about true support among women. So specifically, what does true support among women look like, and how can we foster it in our personal and professional lives?
I think for me, there is no difference between professional and personal lives when it comes to supporting each other and encouraging each other to be more brave and celebrating each other's achievements, even if it's a good night's sleep. I think it's pretty important among women. And we just realized that my whole art journey started with the mother of Aslihan. And she was a very big inspiration for me. And also she motivated me a lot to continue it later on. So I think a very strong professional network is crucial to have encouragement to do our passion in life. I think that, yeah, that's how I see the true support among women.
In terms of external and internal barriers that prevent women from supporting each other, how do you think we can break these barriers?
I think the biggest barrier among women is jealousy, unfortunately. That's how I see it, especially in professional lives. And I don't really have a very nice experience when it comes to jealousy at work. When I was working as a business analyst, I used to work for a company where I think it was only me and maybe two other women in the team. So it was not a very welcoming environment. And jealousy is not good for that at all. But I also realized that a nice question can change the whole dynamic between two women. And even if we just ask the other person how they feel today, it can create a bond, especially when they are going through a hard time and you are also going through a hard time, and it can change the whole connection. My experience is jealousy. That can prevent us from being nice to each other at work or in personal lives.
That's a common theme, but it's definitely a good point. And and I guess it sort of builds onto the next question is, although I have no business management or business analyst experience, but I can assume that it's more male dominated, the field. Perhaps I can say that. So what do you think, or what is your experience? How can we navigate competition versus collaboration in these male-dominated spaces?
I think one of the things we can do is recognize each other's success. That's for sure at work, and giving a nice feedback. It can create a nice connection again between two women. And so when I started my own business, I started everything from scratch, and I met so many amazing women along the way. For example, I started to work with a girl who is a photographer, and she was very, very good. And when I had my first art show, I invited her to the show, and she was so good that the museum made a deal with her. So since then, she became like the official photographer for the museum. And I think it's a nice, it was quite unintentional, but I could offer her a very nice business service for the future. And I have many other stories about that I used to work with someone, and they did a very good job, and for the future they invited them for other events as well. So I think it's a very nice way to help each other in business. I think it's a good thing to encourage them to find their path in life.
That's amazing. It also brings us on to the next question about mentorship, because it sounds like you're practically a mentor to a lot of people that you've either worked with or taught or just been involved in their lives. I know Aspahan's spoken about you as well a lot. So do you think this idea of mentorship can create a long-term change? How do you think we can build stronger mentorship networks between women?
I think we have to be very open to asking advice from other women. That's what helped me the most. And again, the mother of Aslihan, she's also quite my mentor in life and also for my art. And so every time when I have a block in my life or somewhere else, I can just ask her. And she's very, very wise. So I know that I can trust her. I'm pretty sure that it shows other women that having a mentor is very nice in our life. And my other mentor is also my mother. I have my family only has very, very strong women. So I was very lucky to learn from them. And they all have a community. And they have many female friends that they can go out with, or they can have dinners together and they can discuss about their lives. Should I also talk about the mentorship in business in general?
Yeah, it's yours to take. But you're mentioning really, really interesting parts. So I want to come back to something that you said there, but please keep going. Yeah.
All right. If I think about my life in business, I have very, very nice mentors. And at first, they only helped me at the job, but after that, they became also my friends. And I think it didn't happen to me with men. It happened to me only with women. So maybe there is a huge difference between having a female or a male mentor in business. And it's just nice to know that there is someone who you can ask advice from in general.
Yeah, definitely. Now, before I forget to come back to something that you said there that really stuck with me is the whole notion of, and you only mentioned that obviously it's, I guess it's your heritage, right? So as you said, there's a lot of strong women. There's a strong
Yes.
foundation of women in your family, so within your community. So that's really, really nice to hear. Is, you know, part of our, I guess, where the project was coming from is specifically talking about a heritage and cultural heritage, but heritage, whether that be, you know, like blood family or the people you grew up with or surround yourself with. And I think it's really interesting that, especially later in life, women realize that how important sisterhood is, or, you know, surrounding yourself with women that actually support you. Because I think growing up, sometimes, you know, it could be school education or even just societal trends. Sometimes women are put against each other as competition. We're almost made into belief that we're pitted against each other sometimes, you know, at least even in my experience in growing up. And I'm also beginning to realize that it's the exact opposite. You know, you can go way, way forward if you take women as your peers and decide to support each other, and you're in this together. So I think that was really important that you said. And it says a lot about you as a person too, that, you know, you, wherever you go, whether that be friends or business, you create these lasting connections. So that's really admirable. Yeah, really nice to hear. I guess also all the questions kind of build up on each other, but this question is, how does leadership, so the representation of leadership, impact the next generation of women?
I think it totally affects them because I have a very bad experience with that. And if young girls, they see that a leader can only be a man, I think it's not a good example. So I'm very happy that in the last few years there are more women in management positions. In Hungary, it's not so good yet, but we hope that it's going to change in the future. But it's very, very important, and I think not just in business, everywhere, like in schools, for example, it's also very important to have female and also male teachers. I think sometimes it's also a problem that, at least in Hungary, there are few men teachers in general. And it also shows like it should be balanced, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So we have our final question is part of a workshop that we've actually been holding with people all around the world. So it'd be really cool if you could answer this question. What are some of the ways that you think women can uplift each other and empower each other in daily lives?
Mm-hmm. I have a very nice story for that question. 2 years ago, I was flying from Rome to Budapest, and there was a woman sitting next to me, and she had a huge panic attack. She started crying, and I didn't know what to do. But nobody did anything around us, but she was really crying. I just unconsciously held her hand, and she got so much better. So I think it's a very, very small thing that we can do for each other in a daily life. And it costs nothing. And I think it totally works. For example, I have a coworker. She always comes to my class on a Tuesday morning just to see how I feel. And it can change my day. Even if I'm dying inside, it can change my day.
It's that idea of like human connection, right? I think sometimes
Yes.
like as we don't have that in professional places, like you said, because of the competition aspect.
Just ask each other how we feel. Mm-hmm. And I also have another funny story that when I was studying in Istanbul, I realized that brotherhood is very, very important for Turkish men. And it would be nice to have sisterhood in my life as well. I see it in Hungary sometimes, but in Turkey, I think, Aslihan, you know, it's much more popular that they have brotherhood. And I think we should also do the same. in our daily life.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. Yeah. This is really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because yeah, we all, we're all human beings. And even just asking, as you said, asking like just how are you, or just checking in on them, it could mean so much. We don't know. Everybody's dealing with so many things in their lives, and now society is made to believe that we don't have time to ask that question, or we ask it, but do we really want to hear it? Yes, we do, right? So it makes such a big difference.
Even if it's on the public transport. It happened to me a few days ago that I saw a young girl. She was listening to music and the man started to talk to her. And she didn't want that, but she didn't do anything. But I kept my eyes on them in case something happens. So I think it's also very important just to take care of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sense of community. I think in a lot of European countries, that sense of community is lost. Like everyone thinks their issue is only their issue. They don't want to get involved in other people's problems, right? And especially just out in the public.
Yeah, it's almost that we're relearning to break down some of these societal barriers that, as people living in Europe, that we were taught, to no, don't talk to strangers. That's not your business. So you have to relearn that.
Even like your neighbor, like how many people would help their neighbor or even know what their neighbor's name is? I know where I lived. I did in London, which is really sad.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I talk to people, like even at the grocery store. And I remember when I was younger, I made fun of my mom because she was doing it, but now I'm doing it again. And I think I really enjoy it just to talk to people around me.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
And Hania, I get that what you said about like feeling that way in London, because when I visited and gone to see my friends, no one, like, I just feel like people just walk right past you, or people just like bump past you. Like there isn't that kind of like care for
There's
others.
even times like you'll see mothers with pushchairs on the train platform and there's no lift and people will walk past and not help them. I'm just like, this is really, really not good. I always try and help, but when I see at least 10 people will walk past before someone will offer a helping hand is it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Well, but on the flip side of it, there's women like Orshi who definitely takes care of the community. So, we have hope that even small changes in the world.
Exactly. Hopefully we can create some type of sisterhood between us who are trying. So
yes. We are essentially trying to create something, across the globe, really, because we're in 3 different countries at the moment. So yeah, quite international. Thank you so much.
I love like what you said about supporting women like from the ground up. So it doesn't have to be like big gestures. It's just like looking out for one another as like the first hurdle to creating like a bigger community. I really like that.
I might have one more question I might try to fit in here. It wasn't on the questions that we've given you, but basically switching industries, right? So in your career, you really started out, I could say the whole business analyst, financial sector, let's say, to something completely opposite. Because I feel like that was such a brave thing that you did. A lot of people don't have that bravery, and they end up doing a job that they're unhappy for the rest of their lives. And seeing you happy doing your passion and art is such an inspiring thing, and almost, I know it probably wasn't easy, but how were you able to kind of break out of that corporate shell to say, no, this is what I want to do? And because you must have had that faith and belief in yourself that you're gonna, it's almost risky, to make that decision, that give up secure, 9 to 5, but you want to do essentially what you always meant to do, essentially, right? Art.
Yes, I just felt that I only have one life and I don't want to spend my whole life in an office. So after I quit, I was trying to find a part-time job at the beginning, but unfortunately it didn't work, because even if it's a part-time job, if you work as an investment manager, you have no life, even if it's a part-time job. After that, I just realized that I don't need another job. because I could build and grow my business quite easily, let's say, because I started to build a community before I quit the corporate job. So I started to offer courses for my art, and I realized that many people are interested in it. So I think it's one of the things that it made me brave, that I could see that there are many people who would come. And I think the other part is that I said before, that I have very strong women in my family. So the way how they raised me, I didn't even question that it wouldn't work, because I knew that if it doesn't work, I can just find a job and find a solution for my art. So yeah, I think there are many factors that made me brave in that moment. It was a very happy time when I left the corporate world, and I could feel myself again, and I could just have yoga classes in the morning, and the whole stress I had in the last 8 years, it just went away like very easily.
No, it's amazing that you left something, like Sahan said, something secure and stable to do something that you love. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's really inspiring.
My family was a bit scared, honestly, when I left
I can imagine.
the job. But they were also very happy. So it was, they created a very nice environment for us to be ourselves. So that me and my brothers, they are also very brave in general.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time and for these incredible conversations.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
We are really excited to welcome our next guest speaker, Dr. Jay Coombs. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Jay Coombs is a well-rounded expert with significant experience as a development practitioner. Dr. Coombs has been instrumental in the design, implementation, management, and evaluation of numerous initiatives in collaboration with national, international, and multilateral organizations in her home country, Belize.
Dr. Coombs brings extensive expertise in project management, particularly in integrating gender, social inclusion, rights-based approaches, and sustainable strategies into development planning and interventions. Her advisory and technical support have been pivotal in aligning organizational strategies with desired change trajectories that advance women's empowerment, inclusion, and voice.
Having advanced degrees in politics and development policy and planning, Dr. Coombs has a wealth of experience in designing and conducting data collection and analysis for knowledge production that centers the priorities of women and men in multiple sectors.
Her leadership at the Centre for Applied Development Studies has been crucial in producing multiple assessments and reports for international donors and financial entities, and she is highly regarded for her ability to develop, plan, facilitate, and assess participatory training methodologies for diverse and multilingual participants. She also enjoys travelling with her husband and 3 children, gardening, and relaxing with a good read. Welcome, Dr. Coombs. We're really pleased to have you here with us today. Where are you joining us from?
Thank you for welcoming me. I'm joining you from Belize.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you so much for being here. And I guess without further ado, we can get right into the questions. So our first question for you today is, how do women act as keepers and transmitters of cultural heritage within families and communities?
Are in fact the main keepers of culture and heritage. They are the ones to pass this knowledge, practice, and experience to their families, especially to their children. But they do so in their role as caregivers. They do so in their role as managers of the home. They also do so just with their personalities and what they do on a day-to-day basis when engaging with their children, their friends, family, and certainly just by the way they carry out their roles within the home and in the workplace, but mostly by sharing their own experience with their children, the language that they use, the humor that they apply, the foods that they serve, and just being able to help their children, their families, their spouses to bring out their ideas and to have a space where they can share. And of course, the passing down of some of these practices take place in multiple spheres and in multiple ways, just by being in their homes generally, where they feel safe, where they are certainly in a management and leadership role. So they use that space a lot to pass on the cultural traditions within the family.
Thank you. Amazing. Yes, thank you so much.
Moving on to our next question. In what ways can cultural heritage empower women, and in what ways can it also present challenges?
I think it's very empowering culture. I come from a cultural background that is very matriarchal, and so there is a lot of leverage that the woman, in my case, a woman would have to feel empowered and to be provided with just the knowledge that there is a particular role for you within your own culture. And so it's very freeing because you're able to pass on certain knowledge and to lead in a particular way and to even just be a particular person within your home environment, your work environment, your social environment for sure. But as with everything, there are limitations with culture to some extent. It may not evolve as fast as you need to, given your societal expectations, perhaps. And even interacting outside of this expected role can be challenging, and it can wear on you if you're not careful in also explaining why it is that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and even challenging some of your own cultural expectations, roles, and responsibilities that are placed on you. But all of this ought to be incremental and should be incremental, because by no means should everything be gotten rid of. It's what has brought one here. But certainly it can be challenging when some of those cultural expectations and roles no longer apply in a way that advance your own personality, your own person as a woman. But it's always there as a fallback to the extent that you need it. That's the comfort of culture as well. So there's always a frame of reference to refer to when you need to be able to find yourself and to ground yourself in a particular space.
Amazing. You said some amazing, really interesting points there that I think I want to come back to after some of the questions, especially relating to heritage and how that shapes us as women, as people, and interestingly how some of those things that we grew up with, whether that be rooted in traditional culture, how that kind of changes as we grow, and how certain things we leave and then pick up again later in our lives, and in finding ourselves, how important it is to, at the end of the day, go back to our roots and traditions to find ourselves in today's world, really. So actually the next question sort of builds onto this. So how do globalization and modernization impact women's roles in preserving traditions, whether that be these cultural traditions or traditions in the family or heritage?
I think it's less evident sometimes that it's impacting, and perhaps it is linked with what I mentioned earlier with regards to trying to find harmony. I wouldn't say balance, because that's what we're always searching for and moving towards, but just trying to find the harmony with what is impacting on women from a global perspective, and how then we have the tools to navigate these changes. But a lot of that comes to me from community and the feeling of being a part of a larger process, and not necessarily feeling isolated from what is happening globally in terms of modernization, as you said, and globalization, but seeing this as an opportunity to learn from other women, how in fact they're navigating these changes, and sharing your own experience. I think there's value in community, and it's also critical to be mindful of the space in which you're existing, because it's not necessarily the same as everyone's own space, but at the same time there are lessons to be learned. I think that women are always prepared to teach or to share, for the most part, because of our nurturing spirit, that feminine aspect of wanting to also care for the other tends to come out. And so it's looking for spaces where one can learn and looking for examples from other women. And if you have to be the one that's creating the example, then feeling as if there is references, other people that you can speak to, especially other women in other spaces, and who are influencing thoughts and ideas. It's very iterative. You're always adjusting and adapting. So having that learning mentality, being open to other ideas from other people, especially from other women, because the experiences of other women certainly helps with informing how you are also able to navigate this very dynamic time and very dynamic spaces, many of the times as well, quite dynamic.
Definitely, really interesting. The next question follows: what role does storytelling, whether through art, literature, or oral history, play in shaping women's identities within their cultural heritage?
No, I think it's crucial. We may not consider ourselves as storytellers, but we are. Stories can come from our own life and what we're doing, but also it breaks down some of the more complex issues just by being able to tell stories and to say where what is happening outside of you impacts what you do and how you move in multiple spaces. We tell stories through our food, and we can use the space of having food as a time to tell stories. It's really important that our stories are told, and more people are looking for the space for those stories to be told and for them to be centered in the stories. I feel also that the areas of work that we undertake is also important for storytelling, because we generally have careers that reflect the story that we are also projecting. So stories are critical, and we tell stories with different kinds of languages. Our body language, we also use our local languages, our dialects.
Amazing, incredible. Yeah, no, really important. And actually, both Amelia and myself included our backgrounds in anthropology. So stories as a whole for us is a really important. Know how powerful is it, and how it shaped basically humanity and how we use storytelling as human.
You asked earlier about culture too, and so our culture gets passed on through stories just as well, right? Traditions are also passed on through stories. I think the stories also humanize and make a human connection even more profound.
100%, absolutely, 100%. Next question that we have is about how do different generations of women inspire and challenge each other in their fight for equality and self-definition?
I think across the generations, you can see some differences. And maybe it's just building on rather than very distinct actions, because we can only build on the work, for instance, of our ancestors, right? So I would see that for our ancestors, for the most part, it's really about centering the family and strengthening the family unit, right? So they were always at home, and in my own culture, they were always at home and making sure that the household, the children were taken care of. And they valued also the extended family, because in the extended family, you're able to have a lot more protection, support, and guidance for children and for themselves. So the extended family is critical. So that's the foundation of it all. And they do that sacrificing for the next generation, which would then be the generation that takes advantage of education, formal education, training, working outside of the home. So that generation is also very critical. This new generation, in terms of just adding more reach and really expanding and even breaking down some of the actions of their predecessors, they're finding creative and interesting ways of passing on some of the same knowledge, but of course with the influence of technology, their social engagement, their knowledge of the world as they see it.
So our final question for today is: how can women honor their heritage while also redefining traditions to reflect contemporary values?
That is a very important question indeed, like all the others, of course. And I think that what this question does is to tell us or to ask of us what roles we play overall in ensuring that indeed we pass on our heritage and that we are considered important in this process just as well. I'm speaking about women, especially. First of all, women need to continue to recognize that they are doing great work, that they are the world would not be what it is without them. So just acknowledging the value of women, of our femininity, of our presence, of the fact that we bring a lot to the table, including ourselves, of course, but our own thoughts, our own ideas. Because women tend to invest a lot in what they're doing, so they're going to learn as much as they can, so that when they're sat at the table, they're able to contribute. So continuous learning, I would say, would be a good way for advancing our heritage, of course. And I would also say just be kind to yourself as well. We tend to be harsh on ourselves, and maybe we expect more from us because we're women or because we're socialized to be that way. But just being very mindful and attentive to the fact that we already do a lot. We already contribute significantly, and just taking some time to acknowledge our own contributions, our own presence. That to me is important just as well. Critically, we need to bring other women along so that we're not in a place of isolation, churning along and trying to get a lot done on our own, because again, it's considered to be, in these contemporary times, an individualistic exercise to succeed on your own. But in truth, we've been here in this space, and we continue to be because of the previous experiences, contributions, sacrifices, but on the backs of other women just as well. Because it's not typical for us to have these kinds of leadership positions outside of the home. So we have to be patient with those who we are bringing to this space, and also as we interact in this new kind of dynamic engagement by bringing other women along. It's breaking the mold for us just as well, because we're taught to pull up the drawbridge of wherever we're located, whatever space we're in, because it's almost okay to have just one or two women. But using this as an example, as you have extended the invitation for me to share my ideas and my thoughts, then it is also something that I see that can be multiplied. Obviously, through this medium, with other people seeing our interviews, they'll be able to pick up on some of our thoughts and ideas.
Definitely. That's really powerful. I love that. Thank you so much for coming and speaking about all this today. A moment I really loved was you talking about the importance of family. I feel like obviously it's so important to have community through friends, but family is also such an important unit to have that in, and underpins our values as young women and going into adulthood and growing and changing. It's really important. Thank you.
I think your generation, more than ever, challenges the family, right? They're asking questions. They want to know, why are we still doing these kinds of things, and how does this help me? Or perhaps even going to the point where they're saying this no longer works, right? So storytelling is important indeed, and it starts within the family, and families come in all different shapes and forms and dimensions and so on.
Thank you so much. And I think it's another really important point you mentioned, really interesting, is the whole notion of how specifically in this age of AI, technical, and just a lot of the last 50 years, there's been so many changes. The world has never seen such a big change. And this whole notion of being individual, being I would almost say selfish, is promoted to be selfish. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that it's actually quite false, becoming quite false, because the notion of having a sisterhood or having connections with people, we've talked about this with other guests as well, is that, and came up again here, it's really interesting to me that it's natural to rely on our peers, and it's natural to seek help from others, and especially from other women. And yes, it's important to take care of ourselves and know our own worth, but doing that without the respect to the elderly, to your ancestors, and it all comes together, really, it all builds up on.
When we're in social gatherings, there is the benefit of what you bring because of the culture and the tradition. There's a camaraderie, there's a sisterhood, like you say, because there's an area of commonality.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It was really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Hani, Amelia, and Aslahan, for extending the invitation and for facilitating my timeline. So thank you so much. And again, this is about holding that space. So thanks again for extending the invitation.
Of course, thank you for joining us. What an amazing series of conversations. Each of our guests, Dr. Cathryn MacCallum, Dr. Coombs, and Orsolya Takács, brought such unique perspectives. One thing that really stood out to me was how all three ladies had powerful thoughts to share on how they navigate being a woman in their professions and their personal lives. There was a lot to take away from all they said.
Absolutely. Whether it was Dr. Cathryn talking about workplace culture and leadership as a woman, or the way Dr. J spoke about the importance of being connected to your family, roots, and identity, these discussions have definitely given us so much to reflect on.
Yeah, definitely. And what I found really powerful was when Orsolya reminded us how important it is to look beyond societal norms and to be kind to ourselves and to yourselves and those around you, even if they are a stranger. These stories remind us the importance of supporting and creating safe spaces for each other as women.
As you see from these conversations, as women, we are all fighting the same fight. We are better off together, supporting each other, and none of us should feel like we're alone. So again, we'd like to say a huge thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their wisdom and experiences with us.
And of course, a big thank you to everyone watching and being part of these important conversations.
We truly hope that these stories inspire you as much as they inspired us. Keep growing and keep supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time.